I'm Franklin. Tonight, we're checking into the Whispering Pines. It's January 1989. Michael slammed his hands against the steering wheel of his Buick as the engine sputtered and died. The heater gave one last pathetic wheeze and cut out. Outside, the world had ceased to exist. It was just a swirling, howling wall of white. He checked the leather bag on the passenger seat. It was still there, heavy, full of cash that belonged to people who didn't call the police. They called cleaners. He grabbed the bag and pushed open the door. The wind hit him like a frozen hammer. Through the squall, he saw a faint, flickering neon sign buzzing in pink and green. The Whispering Pines Motel. Vacancy. He stumbled through the drifts, his dress shoes useless in the snow. The motel looked like something out of a 1950s postcard. A row of log cabins connected to a main lodge nestled deep in the pines. It looked too peaceful, too perfect. Michael pushed through the heavy oak door of the lobby. The roar of the wind instantly vanished, replaced by the crackle of a massive stone fireplace and the soft crooning of a Bing Crosby record. The air smelled of cinnamon, old wood, and something else. Something antiseptic, like pine cleaner used to scrub a floor a little too hard. "Rough night for a drive, son," a voice said. Behind the front desk stood an old man. He was cleaning a pair of wire-rimmed glasses with a handkerchief. He wore a thick wool cardigan and had a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. They were pale, watery blue, like ice on a frozen lake. "Just need a room," Michael said, shivering, clutching the bag tight. "My car died. Phone line's working." "Oh, lines have been down since Tuesday," the old man said, opening a heavy ledger book. "Storm's got teeth. I'm Mr. Henderson. We don't get many visitors in the dead of winter. Usually folks know better." He slid a brass key across the counter. "Room 4. "You're lucky," Henderson continued, his voice soft and rhythmic. "We have a full house tonight. Other travelers, stranded just like you. Dinner is at 7. My wife makes a meatloaf that, well, let's just say it sticks to your ribs." Michael took the key. He looked around the lobby. In the corner, sitting in a velvet armchair, was a woman knitting. She hadn't looked up once. The needles clicked together with a speed that was almost mechanical. Click, click, click. "Thanks," Michael muttered. I'll just go to my room." He went back out into the cold, fighting his way to cabin 4. Inside, it was warm. Too warm. The radiator hissed aggressively. He threw the bag of money under the bed and went to the window to close the curtains. That's when he saw them. Through the gaps in the blizzard, he could see the windows of the other cabins. In cabin 3, a man was standing perfectly still, facing the glass, staring out into the storm. In cabin 5, a family, mother, father, 2 kids, were sitting at a dinner table. They weren't eating. They were just sitting there, smiling, motionless. Michael rubbed his eyes. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the stress. He closed the curtains tight and sat on the edge of the bed. Then, the phone on the nightstand rang. Michael stared at it. Henderson had said the lines were down. He picked up the receiver slowly. "Hello?" There was no voice on the other end, just the sound of wind. And then, very faintly, buried under the static, a voice that sounded exactly like his own. "Don't eat the meatloaf, Michael. It's not meat." Michael stared at the receiver in his hand for a long time after the line went dead. The silence in cabin 4 wasn't empty. It was heavy, pressing against his eardrums like deep water. He hung up the phone. His hand was trembling, just a little. Stress, he told himself. Just the stress of the drive and the storm. But his stomach growled. a painful, hollow twist. He hadn't eaten since a gas station hot dog in Duluth 6 hours ago. Warning or not, he had to go to the lodge. He wrapped his coat tight and stepped back out into the blizzard. The wind had changed pitch. It was no longer a howl, but a low, rhythmic thrumming that vibrated in his chest. The snow was coming down in thick, wet clumps, sticking to his eyelashes and filling his nose with the smell of ozone and frozen pine needles. The main lodge was a beacon of amber light in the white void. As Michael pushed through the heavy oak doors, the heat hit him like a physical slap, thick, humid, and smelling overwhelmingly of roasted meat and sage. The dining room was rustic to the point of parody. The walls were lined with taxidermy, deer heads, a snarling wolf, a massive black bear standing on its hind legs. But there was something wrong with their eyes. The glass orbs weren't staring forward. They all seemed to be rolled back slightly, showing too much white, as if the animals had died in a moment of supreme terror. "Right on time, Mr. Vance," Henderson chirped from behind the bar. He was polishing a glass that was already spotless. Michael took a seat at a small corner table. The checkered tablecloth was plastic, sticky to the touch. He looked around. The family from Cabin 5 was seated in the center of the room. Up close, they were even more unsettling. The father was wearing a flannel shirt that looked brand new, the creases still sharp. The mother had a beehive hairdo that belonged in 1965, not 1989. And the two children, a boy and a girl, sat with their hands folded perfectly on the table, not fidgeting, not whispering. They looked like dolls left on a shelf. "Here we are," a woman's voice boomed. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the kitchen. She was a massive woman, her arms thick and pale like rising dough. She wore a floral apron stained with dark, wet grease spots. She carried a steaming metal tray. She plopped a plate in front of Michael. The meatloaf was a thick gray slab, drowning in a brown gravy that shimmered under the lights. Beside it was a scoop of instant mashed potatoes that had already formed a dry crust, and peas that were a radioactive shade of green. "Eat up, hun," Mrs. Henderson said. Her face was flushed, sweaty. She smelled of raw onions and bleach. "My secret recipe. The meat is locally sourced." Michael picked up his fork. The metal was cold, heavy. He looked at the family. At a synchronized signal he must have missed, they all picked up their forks together. Clink. They cut into the meat. Scrape. They lifted the food to their mouths. Chew. It was mechanical. The father chewed exactly 10 times before swallowing. The mother stared straight ahead, a small smear of gravy on her chin that she didn't wipe away. Michael cut a small piece of his own loaf. The texture was wrong. It didn't crumble like ground beef. It pulled apart in stringy, elastic strands. He brought it to his nose. Under the sage and the heavy gravy, there was a faint copper scent, like sucking on a penny. He looked at the man from Cabin 3, who was sitting alone by the window. The man wasn't eating. He was staring at Michael. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were bloodshot. He slowly shook his head. A microscopic movement, barely an inch to the left, then back. Michael lowered his fork. "Is everything all right, sir?" Henderson was suddenly standing right beside the table. He moved silently, despite his heavy boots. "Not really hungry," Michael lied, his throat tight. "Stomach bug." "A shame," Henderson sighed, his smile tightening. "Waste is a sin in these parts, Mr. Vance. The winter takes so much. We have to hold on to what we have." Suddenly, the little boy at the center table dropped his fork. It hit the floor with a loud clang that echoed in the silent room. Nobody moved. The boy didn't reach for it. The father didn't scold him. They just froze, forks halfway to their mouths. The boy's face was blank, but his eyes were darting frantically from side to side, screaming in panic, while his body remained paralyzed. Then, with a wet, tearing sound, the boy's jaw clicked. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, a thick, dark liquid began to drool from the corner of his lips, dripping onto his pristine Sunday shirt. "He's just tired," Mrs. Henderson said, appearing from the shadows with a fresh pitcher of water. Her voice was soothing, terrifyingly calm. "Sometimes the little ones spoil early." Michael stood up, his chair scraping violently against the wood floor. "I'm going to my room." "But dessert is coming," Henderson said, his eyes now completely devoid of warmth. They looked like the glass eyes on the wall. "Cherry pie, it's warm." "I'm leaving," Michael said, backing away toward the door. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and pushed through the doors, stumbling back into the snow. The wind howled instantly, drowning out the Bing Crosby song. He ran to cabin 4, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He slammed the door, locked the deadbolt, and shoved the heavy dresser in front of it. He collapsed on the bed, gasping for air. He looked at the phone. He needed to hear that voice again. He needed to know what was happening. But the phone wasn't there anymore. The cord had been ripped out of the wall, and sitting on the nightstand where the phone had been was a plate. On it was a single, perfect slice of cherry pie. Steam was still rising from it. Someone had been in his room while he was at dinner. Michael didn't eat the pie. He threw it into the toilet and watched the red filling dissolve in the water like a thick, arterial clot. He couldn't stay in the cabin. The silence was no longer a refuge. It was the quiet of a slaughterhouse between shifts. He needed his weapon. He opened the leather bag, pushed aside the stacks of cash, and pulled out his snub-nosed .38 revolver. The metal was ice cold, biting into his palm like a jagged tooth. He waited until the grandfather clock in the lodge struck midnight. The deep, brassy chimes were muffled by the snow, sounding like they were underwater. Michael cracked his door open and stepped out. He didn't go to the lodge. He followed the drag marks. In the fresh snow, he saw 2 deep furrows, like the tracks of a heavy sled, leading away from the back of the kitchen toward a large, windowless barn at the edge of the pines. The air near the barn was different. It didn't smell like wood smoke. It smelled of vinegar, salt, and raw, wet copper. Michael pushed the barn door open. The heat inside was suffocating, humid, tropical, and reeking of chemicals. The room was lit by swaying, naked bulbs that cast long, jittery shadows across walls lined with industrial shelving. The shelves were filled with jars, gallon-sized glass jars, cloudy with yellow fluid. Inside them floated strips of preserved human skin. One jar held a patch of flesh with a blurred anchor tattoo. Another held a hand, the fingers fixed in a permanent, claw-like cramp. Spare parts. In the center of the room stood a massive wooden table, stained black by years of drainage. On it lay a man. Michael recognized him from a missing poster he'd seen at a gas station 200 miles back. A state trooper named Miller. Miller was stripped to his undershirt. His skin looked slack, gray, and unnaturally smooth. But the horror wasn't that he was dead. It was that he was repurposed. A long, jagged line of heavy-duty staples ran from his throat to his waist. There was no blood. Through a gap in the staples, Michael saw the truth. Miller had been hollowed out. Inside the chest cavity, instead of organs, was a framework of wooden struts and thick, yellow industrial insulation foam. A small, rusted electric motor was bolted where his heart should have been, turning a slow, rhythmic crank that made the dead man's fingers twitch. Twitch, twitch, twitch. "The rivets are rusting, Arthur," a voice muttered from the shadows. Mr. Henderson stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing his cozy cardigan. He was wearing a heavy rubber apron, slick with a dark, oily sheen. He held a grease gun in one hand and a long, curved upholstery needle in the other. "It's the humidity," Mrs. Henderson sighed, emerging from behind a stack of crates. She was stirring a bucket of thick, pinkish wax. "The state troopers always last the shortest. Too much muscle fiber. It doesn't take the wax as well as the office types." Michael backed away, his stomach heaving. They weren't just killing people. They were tanning them, turning them into living, breathing furniture to populate their perfect, frozen little world. He turned to flee, but his foot caught on a heavy tarp. He stumbled, kicking it aside. Underneath wasn't junk. It was luggage. Dozens of identical leather satchels. Michael froze. He opened the one at the top. It was filled with cash. His cash. He looked at his own bag, then back at the pile. There were 10, 15 bags, all identical, and pinned to a corkboard above the workbench were 15 driver's licenses. Each one had his photo. Each one said Michael Vance. "You're a very consistent guest, Michael," Henderson said, not even looking up from his work on the trooper. "You always arrive at 6:15, you always bring the bag, and you always find the barn by midnight." Michael raised his revolver, his hands shaking violently. "Stay back, I'll blow your head off." He pulled the trigger. Click. He pulled it again. Click. "We took the firing pin out of the first Michael's gun back in November," Henderson said softly, finally looking up. His eyes weren't human. They were the same glass orbs as the deer on the wall. "We just keep resetting the stage, son. You're not a traveler. You're the raw material." Michael looked down at his hands. The skin on his knuckles was beginning to crack. Not from the cold, but from dryness. It was flaking off like old parchment, revealing a layer of gray, treated mesh underneath. "Am I?" Michael whispered, his voice sounding tinny, like it was coming through a cheap speaker. "You're almost finished." Mrs. Henderson smiled, approaching him with a handful of staples. "The gentleman in cabin 3 has finally started to rot. We need a fresh face for the window. You have such a lovely, terrified expression, Michael. It'll look wonderful under the neon lights." The silence in the barn was broken only by the rhythmic thump hiss of the industrial heater and the flaking sound of Michael's own skin hitting the floor. He stared at his hands. The gray, mesh-like fabric visible through the cracks in his knuckles was pulsating, as if trying to breathe. "Don't fight it, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, stepping closer. The staple gun in her hand glinted under the swaying bulbs. "It's like falling asleep in the snow. First it stings, then it's warm, then it's just quiet." Michael didn't scream. He didn't have the air for it. He lunged. He didn't use the gun. He swung the heavy leather bag full of cash. It hit Mr. Henderson across the face with a sickening, metallic thud. But Henderson didn't fall. His head snapped back at an impossible angle, his glasses flying off. But there was no blood. Only the sound of a dry wooden joint snapping and the smell of old sawdust. Henderson reached up, grabbed his own jaw, and with a horrific crack, snapped it back into place. "That was unneighborly, Michael." Michael scrambled backward, knocking over a shelf of jars. Glass shattered, and the yellow preservative fluid flooded the floor, soaking his boots. He turned and bolted for the back of the barn, pushing through a heavy velvet curtain he hadn't noticed before. He stopped dead. Behind the curtain wasn't the exit. It was a workshop, a gallery of horrors. Rows upon rows of Michaels stood on wooden plinths. Some were half-finished, their wire rib cages exposed. Others were perfect replicas of him, dressed in his own suit, their glass eyes reflecting the dim light. They were all posed in different stages of the loop. Michael checking into the lobby, Michael clutching the bag, Michael looking terrified at the dinner table. "We have to keep the stock fresh," Henderson's voice echoed behind him. The old man was walking slowly, his boots crunching on the glass. The storm outside, it's not just weather. It's a border. Nothing organic survives the crossing. To stay in the pines, you have to become permanent. Michael saw a heavy iron fire axe hanging on the wall. He grabbed it, the weight nearly pulling his arms from their sockets. He felt a surge of adrenaline, but it felt wrong, hot and oily, like a machine overheating. "I'm not staying," Michael hissed. His voice was now a full-blown mechanical rasp. He swung the axe at the nearest Michael. The blade buried itself in the mannequin's chest, releasing a cloud of yellow foam and the smell of stale ozone. He swung again and again, a frantic, desperate attempt to destroy the evidence of his own replaceability. He burst through a fire exit into the blinding white of the blizzard. The cold hit him, but he didn't shiver. He couldn't feel his skin. He ran toward his Buick, but the car was buried under a drift that looked like a frozen grave. He turned toward the main lodge. If he couldn't leave, he would burn the center of the web. He smashed the lodge's front window with the axe and climbed inside. The Bing Crosby record was still playing, skipping on a loop. "I'm dreaming of a white. I'm dreaming of a white." He ran to the kitchen, grabbed a canister of pressurized cleaning fluid, and threw it into the stone fireplace. The explosion didn't just bring fire, it brought a roar of orange light that illuminated the entire lobby. The taxidermy on the walls began to melt. The glass eyes of the bear liquefied and ran like tears down its fur. "You're making a mess, Michael," a voice said from the top of the stairs. It was Mrs. Henderson, but she looked different. Her floral dress was charred, and where her skin had burnt away, there was nothing but a complex lattice of brass gears and copper wiring. She wasn't the butcher. She was the masterpiece. "Do you know why the bag is always full of money?" she asked, her voice now a chorus of a dozen different recordings. "Because you want it to be. The Pines doesn't take what you don't give. You brought your greed here, Michael. You brought your guilt. You built this motel out of the things you were running from." Michael swung the axe, but she caught the handle with a hand that had the strength of an industrial press. The wood snapped like a toothpick. He backed away, into the center of the burning lobby. The heat was melting the wax on his own face now. He looked into a large gold-framed mirror over the mantel. He didn't see a man. He saw a hollow shell. His eyes were gone, replaced by the same watery pale blue glass as Henderson's. His mouth was a hinged slit. And then he saw it. Behind his reflection in the fire-lit mirror were the other guests. The family from Cabin 5, the trooper. They were all standing in the fire, unmoving, their synthetic skin bubbling, but their glass eyes remained fixed on him. They weren't puppets controlled by the Hendersons. They were the Hendersons. "We are all the first, Michael," the father from Cabin 5 said, his voice a perfect match for Michael's own. "And the second, and the third." The lodge began to collapse. The roof groaned under the weight of the snow and the heat of the flames. Michael felt a strange peace. If he burned, the loop would end. No more Michaels, no more bags of money. He let the fire take him. He felt the insulation in his chest ignite, A warm, bright glow that finally chased away the Minnesota cold. Morning, January 15th, 1989. The storm had passed. The sky was a brilliant, heartless blue. A snowplow driver slowed down as he passed the entrance to a road that shouldn't have been there. He saw the remains of a sign, half buried. The Whispering Pines. There was no lodge, just a blackened foundation and a row of scorched cabins. But sitting on the porch of cabin 3 was a figure. It was covered in a fresh layer of frost, but it was perfectly posed, sitting in a wooden chair, staring out at the road. It held a leather bag in its lap. The driver shook his head. "Damned kids and their mannequins," he muttered, and kept driving. As the sound of the plow faded, the figure on the porch shifted. Its glass eyes caught the morning sun, and then, very slowly, it smiled. The Buick, still buried in the snow nearby, suddenly had its radio flicker to life. Static filled the air, followed by a faint, skipping record. "I'm dreaming of a white. I'm dreaming of a white." In the distance, the sound of a sputtering engine echoed through the pines. A new car was coming,